There are moments in life when heaven leans in to listen. Moments when one cry from your spirit pierces eternity and shifts the unseen world. You've prayed before, but this prayer, this one, is not ordinary. This is the kind of prayer that changes history, not just hearts. It's the prayer that alters the trajectory of your destiny, resets your timing, and rewrites your future. So tonight, as we stand on the edge of divine interruption, heaven is waiting for this one prayer, the prayer that will change everything. When heaven responds once, earth can never remain the same. You see, there comes a moment when God decides to step into the affairs of a man, when eternity touches time and the invisible invades the visible. It doesn't take 1,000 prayers. It only takes one that aligns with divine purpose, one that carries the fragrance of faith, surrender, and revelation. When heaven answers once, destinies are rewritten, doors are unlocked, and seasons are redefined. Some of you have been praying, fasting, and waiting, wondering when the answer will come. But I came to tell you, it is not the length of your prayer that moves heaven. It is the alignment of your heart. When heaven finds a voice that echoes its own intention, when your words mirror divine will, that's when heaven stands still and says, "Let it be done." One prayer, one moment, one word, and the entire course of your life begins to shift. Think about it. It was one cry from Jabez that changed his story, one whisper from Hannah that opened her womb, one midnight prayer from Paul and Silas that shook an entire prison. Heaven does not need repetition to release transformation. It only needs recognition of divine timing, of spiritual readiness, of a surrendered vessel saying, "Lord, here I am." When heaven responds once, the natural world begins to bow. Everything that resisted you begins to realign. Suddenly, things that once took years begin to happen in moments. Because when heaven moves, it does not consult your past, it enforces your purpose. You may have been broken, forgotten, or overlooked, but when heaven says now, even your enemies will become witnesses to your rising. And here is the mystery. Heaven does not respond to noise, it responds to faith. It responds to revelation. You can shout for hours and see nothing, but whisper one prayer of faith and angels will move. You can fast for weeks and remain the same, but speak one word with divine understanding and the atmosphere around you will begin to shift. One divine response can restore what 10 years of labor could not. One heavenly answer can bring what a lifetime of strategy could never achieve. So the question is not if heaven can respond. The question is, are you positioned for that response? Are you praying from frustration or from revelation? Are you seeking results or are you seeking His presence? Because heaven's response is not just about giving you things, it's about making you the kind of person who can handle what you've asked for. When heaven responds once, there is no going back. You can't remain the same after divine visitation. Something in you changes permanently. Your words carry new authority. Your steps carry divine direction. You become a voice, an instrument, a channel through which God expresses Himself on earth. And so, I declare tonight, may heaven respond to you once. May that one encounter, that one moment, that one divine yes, mark the turning point of your destiny. Because when heaven responds, once everything on earth must bow. But what happens after heaven responds? What do you do when the answer arrives? That is the next mystery we must uncover. One encounter of prayer can shift the entire course of destiny, just one. Not 1,000 tears, not 100 repetitions. One divine moment when your spirit and God's purpose collide in perfect agreement. You see, destiny doesn't always change in the noise of activity. Sometimes it shifts in the stillness of revelation. There is a kind of prayer that moves you from where you are to where heaven has already prepared for you to be. One prayer born not from emotion but from alignment. When a man discovers that kind of prayer, everything changes. Because destiny is not a destination, it is a divine unfolding. And prayer is the language that unveils it. You don't just pray to be heard, you pray to be aligned. The moment your words match the will of God, something in the invisible realm begins to shift. Time bends, circumstances rearrange. People you've never met begin to carry your name in their spirit. That's the power of one encounter of prayer. It reorganizes the invisible architecture of your life. Think of Jacob on that night. One encounter, one wrestling moment, one divine touch. He entered as Jacob, but he left as Israel. Think of Solomon. One night of prayer, and he stepped into generational wisdom. Think of Jesus in Gethsemane. One prayer that changed eternity itself. When heaven hears a prayer that carries destiny, it cannot remain silent. Because prayer is not convincing God to act, it is aligning yourself to his original intention. And here is the mystery. You never know when that one prayer will be. It might be tonight. It might be that one sentence you speak through tears. It might be that whisper when you have no more strength to explain your pain. Sometimes it's not in your words, but in your surrender. Heaven recognizes brokenness wrapped in faith. Heaven recognizes hearts that say, Lord, if you don't move, I have nowhere else to turn. That is when the shift happens, when your dependence becomes your weapon, when your cry becomes your covenant, when your moment of weakness becomes your platform for divine strength. One encounter, and suddenly what you lost is restored. What was closed begins to open. What was delayed begins to accelerate. Because prayer does not just reach God, it transforms you into the person ready to carry what God has already spoken. But hear this, destiny does not change by routine prayer. It changes by revelatory prayer. The kind of prayer that is born out of understanding, not fear. The kind that doesn't just ask for blessings, but seeks to understand why you were born. Because the moment you discover that purpose and pray from it, heaven moves swiftly. So tonight, as you lift your voice, don't just speak words, seek an encounter. Seek that one divine moment where your prayer touches eternity. Because when one encounter of prayer takes place, destiny can never remain the same. Oh, but how do you sustain that encounter? How do you walk in the momentum of a shifted destiny? That is the next revelation, waiting to be unveiled. The prayer that unlocks what years of effort could not. There are moments in life when your strength reaches its limit, when every door you've knocked on seems sealed, when every connection, every strategy, every plan still leads to the same dead end. And then, in that moment of surrender, one prayer, one cry from the depth of your spirit breaks through what years of labor could not move. Because prayer doesn't just open doors, it opens dimensions. It reaches where effort cannot go and touches what human wisdom cannot understand. You see, there is a point where effort becomes limitation. You can work hard, think smart, and plan well, but if heaven does not breathe upon your labor, it remains ordinary. There are things in life that cannot be achieved by intelligence, influence, or intellect. Some things require divine permission, and that permission is granted only through prayer. When you pray the right way, you access what your education, your experience, and your endurance could never produce. Think of Peter, a skilled fisherman trained by years of experience. Yet one night, his nets came up empty. He tried, he toiled, he worked, and still failed. But one divine instruction, one word from heaven, changed everything. Cast your net on the right side. That was not a fishing strategy, that was a prayer answered. In one moment, what years of effort could not accomplish was completed in minutes. Because when God breathes on your effort, impossibility becomes productivity. There are things waiting on the other side of your prayer that human effort can never access. Because prayer is not man trying to reach God, it's God inviting man into his strategy. It's divine intelligence revealed to human limitation. That's why you can spend 10 years trying to build what one encounter in prayer could establish in a day. The blessing of prayer is acceleration. What should have taken a lifetime can happen in a moment when God steps in. But here's the truth. Many people give up too soon. They stop at the edge of their breakthrough because they think effort alone will bring change. Yet heaven is waiting for that one moment when your words match divine timing. When your surrender becomes louder than your struggle, that's when doors open. Not just doors of opportunity, but doors of understanding, favor, and divine access. And let me tell you this, God is not moved by motion. He is moved by faith. He is not impressed by how long you've tried, but by how much you've trusted. One prayer from a believing heart can collapse barriers that decades of striving could not move. Because effort without divine grace is exhaustion. But prayer with revelation releases acceleration. So tonight, stop fighting with your strength. Step into his strategy. Because one prayer, breathed from the place of revelation, will unlock what years of effort could not achieve. But once that door opens, how do you carry what comes through it? That is the next secret we must uncover. When God says enough, the power of a single life-altering prayer, there comes a time when heaven interrupts the pattern of pain, the cycle of delay, the season of silence, and declares enough. That moment doesn't come because we've cried the loudest or waited the longest. It comes when divine timing meets divine purpose through the cry of faith. One prayer can provoke God to say, "It ends now." And when God says enough, no force in hell can continue what heaven has canceled. There are seasons when you've done all you can. You've prayed, fasted, tried, believed, and still nothing seems to move. But when heaven whispers that word, enough, everything begins to align. The same situation that once mocked you begins to shift. The same mountain that stood immovable begins to crumble. Because when God intervenes, delay turns into destiny and struggle turns into story. Do you remember Israel in bondage? 400 years of slavery, generations of pain, yet one day, one cry rose from the depth of their oppression, and heaven responded. God said, "I have heard their cry, I have seen their suffering, and I have come down." One moment of divine compassion turned centuries of captivity into a night of deliverance. That's what happens when God says enough. The years of waiting collapse into a single day of freedom. And sometimes that enough moment doesn't come when you're strong. It comes when you are at your breaking point. When your voice trembles, when your faith is fragile, when you can barely say the words, "Lord, I still believe." That's when heaven moves. Because God is drawn to desperation wrapped in surrender. He doesn't respond to pride. He responds to brokenness. And one prayer, one moment of genuine surrender can trigger heaven's verdict, "Enough." But you must understand this. When God says enough, he doesn't just end what was hurting you. He introduces what was hidden from you. He doesn't just stop the storm. He reveals your purpose within it. The enough of God is not a conclusion. It's a transition. It marks the end of struggle and the beginning of manifestation. It is the moment when your warfare gives birth to your witness. So don't underestimate your next prayer. You don't know which one will pull the final trigger in heaven's courtroom. You don't know which tear, which whisper, which groan will provoke God's intervention. One moment of divine attention can overturn years of opposition. Because when God speaks, resistance loses its authority. And when God says enough, sickness bows, chains break, poverty lifts, fear dissolves, and destinies awaken. That word from heaven changes everything. One prayer can bring it forth. So tonight, as you open your mouth, dare to believe that this might be your enough moment. Because when heaven speaks that word over your life, everything that stood against you must yield. But after the enough comes the next phase, when God begins to rebuild what was broken. And that, my friend, is where the next mystery unfolds, the turning point, when one prayer rewrites your tomorrow. Every life has a moment when everything changes, a defining encounter, a divine interruption, a single prayer that separates your past from your future. It may not come with thunder, it may not come with lightning, but it comes with clarity. It comes with the quiet authority of heaven saying, "It's time." And when that moment arrives, destiny begins to pivot. The things that once seemed impossible suddenly become inevitable. There is something about prayer that transcends time. It reaches into your tomorrow and rearranges it. While others are planning your defeat, heaven is scripting your victory. One prayer can delete years of mistakes and replace them with seasons of purpose. One encounter can realign every misstep, every loss, every regret. Because when you touch God in prayer, He touches your future in response. Do you remember Elijah on Mount Carmel? One prayer, not a long one, not a loud one, but one saturated with revelation. He said, "Let it be known this day that you are God." And instantly fire fell from heaven. In one moment, national idolatry turned into revival. That was a turning point. Or think of Jonah. One prayer from the belly of a fish changed the destiny of an entire city. When heaven hears sincerity, location doesn't matter. You could be in a pit, a prison, or a storm, but one prayer can rewrite your tomorrow. And here is what makes it powerful. You don't have to understand how God will do it. You only have to believe that He can, because prayer is not logic, it's faith in motion. It's the divine permission for heaven to interfere with the affairs of man. When you pray from revelation, God begins to edit your story. He begins to turn chapters of pain into testimonies of purpose. He takes what was meant for evil and bends it toward your good. That's why the enemy fights prayer. Not because he fears your voice, but because he fears your alignment. He knows that when you pray from the place of faith, your words become laws in the Spirit. You begin to legislate destiny. You begin to declare things that haven't happened yet, and heaven begins to bring them to pass. That's the power of a turning point prayer. It doesn't just change your situation, it changes the script of your life. And when that prayer is answered, you will know it. The peace will be undeniable. The direction will be clear. The doors will open without explanation, because when God rewrites your tomorrow, no man can reverse it. So as you pray tonight, don't pray for survival, pray for transformation. Pray for that one turning point, that one encounter, that one divine response that will rewrite your tomorrow forever. But after tomorrow is rewritten, how do you walk in that new story? How do you sustain the change that prayer has birthed? That is where the next mystery begins. A divine moment that changes everything. The prayer of irreversible transformation. There are encounters in life that leave you marked forever. Moments when God doesn't just answer your prayer, He changes you. Moments when heaven rewrites not just your situation, but your very identity. One divine encounter in prayer can turn a timid heart into a voice of fire. One moment in God's presence can erase the pain of yesterday and reveal the power of purpose. When you truly encounter God in prayer, something shifts permanently. You don't walk out the same. Your language changes, your desires change, your priorities change. Because true prayer is not about informing God of your needs. It's about being transformed into the image of His will. The reason some prayers don't change circumstances is because they were never meant to. They were meant to change you. Think of Moses on the mountain. He went up carrying questions, frustrations, and burdens. But when he came down, his face shone with glory. He didn't just bring answers, he brought transformation. One divine encounter, one moment in God's presence, shifted him from a man of weakness to a leader of nations. That's what happens when you meet God in prayer. The transformation becomes irreversible. You can't fake it. You can't manufacture it. When heaven touches you, something within you is redefined. The fears that once controlled you lose their grip. The opinions of people no longer matter. You stop chasing validation because you've already been confirmed by divinity. Prayer, real prayer, is not a ritual. It's an encounter that alters the very rhythm of your destiny. And when that change happens, everyone around you can see it. You don't have to announce it. Your atmosphere reveals it. You walk differently. You speak with authority. You carry peace even in chaos. Because when transformation becomes your testimony, nothing external can shake what God has established internally. The same storm that used to break you now builds you. The same enemy that used to intimidate you now confirms your strength. There is a prayer that shifts you beyond repair. You can't go back to normal once you've touched eternal. You can't live in the shadows once you've seen the light. That's the power of divine transformation. It is permanent, unshakable, and unstoppable. One encounter, one moment, one whispered, "Yes, Lord," and the old you gives way to the new creation God always saw. So, as you pray tonight, don't just ask for blessings, ask for transformation. Don't just seek an answer, seek an encounter. Because when heaven touches your spirit, change becomes inevitable, irreversible, undeniable. And I declare to you now, may this be the moment that defines your destiny. May this be the prayer that heaven remembers forever. May this be the encounter that breaks every limitation. May your spirit rise, your purpose awaken, your faith ignite. May this be the prayer that seals your transformation. And from this moment forward, may your life never be the same again.